thereafter, I will refer to it by its name, ART. So when I talk about ART, I'm talking about the Archivists Roundtable of Metropolitan New York. However, my proudest moment of professional service was as an elected officer of the Queens College Library and Information Studies Student Association, which was my first introduction to the unpaid intern position. And although I work for the New School Libraries and Archives, my statements and presence here today are as a member of ART and not in any way endorsed by my employer or actually by ART. So here we go. Is this me? It is. Wow. All right. So I'm not actually opposed to internships. I am opposed to unpaid, uncompensated labor. And I am opposed to the complicity of our professional organizations in permitting uncompensated labor to persist unchallenged. Many writers have talked or cited the nexus of industry and higher education as being the culprits in the unpaid internship crisis. But I think that our professional organizations' roles are also overlooked in their complicity. I referenced Henry David Thoreau in my session title because I was thinking a lot about governance, not necessarily government, like the state, specifically the governance of our professional organizations at this moment in history. And you might think that by referring to this moment in history, I'm talking about the presidency of Donald Trump, and you would be wrong. I am talking about the economic and management policies encouraging long-term and permanent precarity that have existed since the 1990s, or more accurately, they matured in the 1990s, but their underlying philosophies originated in the 1970s and 1980s. And I will spare you my lit review, but you can come talk to me for book recommendations later. I'm going to read this for the people on YouTube who might not be able to actually read this slide. This is Henry David Thoreau from Civil Disobedience. If the injustice is part of the necessary friction of the machine of government, let it go, let it go. Perchance it will wear smooth, certainly the machine will wear out. But it is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. Let your life be a counter-friction to stop the machine. What I have to do is to see at any rate that I do not lend myself to the wrong which I condemn. So, in my case, lending myself means idly deleting emails advertising unpaid internship postings that arrive in my inbox through virtue of membership in a professional organization to which I pay dues and vote for directors. By deleting those emails and remaining silent, am I complicit in the economic exploitation of my younger colleagues and the devaluation of my own labor? I would answer yes. So I'm going to talk, I hope, for 15 minutes, describing the trajectory of an internal advocacy campaign a few of us New York City-based archivists have been working on. The centerpiece is a proposal to restrict advertisements of certain unpaid internships. We're not targeting all unpaid internships right now, just internships that should not be classified as internships because they are technically entry-level or contract jobs that require compensation. As I progress, I'll share 4 lessons that we've learned or relearned, and then I propose that we discuss possible next steps for expanding this campaign outward. Maybe you guys can help us, maybe we can help you, maybe we can help each other. So to prepare for this presentation, I went back through my email account to construct a timeline leading up to this proposal. And The proposal, I should note, we submitted to the Archivists Roundtable in February 2017, so that was a year ago. A year ago this month. I discovered that I had been saving potentially exploitative internship postings distributed through the Art Jobs listserv for several years. And you'll see what I mean by exploitative in just a moment. I started reviewing these internship postings around the time that current and prospective library school students started sending me formal and mostly informal requests for mentoring. What I wanted to do was to warn these new professionals who trusted me, why I don't know, but they trusted me, to be careful with their labor. It didn't occur to me until recently that instead of focusing on the institutions creating these internship postings, maybe it would be better and easier, and if we take the advice of a certain economist that we heard about yesterday, efficient, maybe it would be better to address the entity acting as the information conduit, which would be my local professional organization. So the straw that broke the camel's back and led to my presence here, right here today, was a posting so egregious, I was literally shocked by it. And I'm not using like shocked in a figurative sense, I mean like a literal sense. I actually remember sitting in front of my computer screen, just totally in shock, reading this message over and over again in rage and disbelief. I sent it to a few fellow archivists to confirm that I was not insane and that, yes, I should be outraged. We should all be outraged about this posting. It was for an unpaid, for-credit internship involving building a digital preservation system from scratch, digitizing and cataloging thousands, and the exact language was hundreds, maybe low thousands, of visual materials, working up to 20 hours per week with no end date. And the kicker was the internship supervisor was a direct mail marketing manager. So for anyone in doubt, and I cannot believe that there's anyone in this audience who's in doubt, this is not an internship. This is a job. And while it may be an extreme example, it's not an aberration. So here's my first slide. So the lesson we learned here, or I learned, is reach out to people you trust when you're upset, share your concerns with them, and don't be perceived as negative. What's negative is the situation, not you. So important for people who've drunk the likability Kool-Aid. This is my favorite, being angry together is so much better than being angry alone. And this is my mantra. So that fateful email arrived in my inbox in August 2016, and I immediately initiated a respectful email exchange with the art president about the propriety of such postings being offered to art members via our official art-sanctioned listserv, and I offered a proposal that we begin vetting internship announcements. She offered to bring my proposal to the art board, and it was duly rejected on the grounds that it limited student choice. So we just heard earlier today about how choice is often used to mask an underlying condition. So this is a great example. At that point, I informed Art that I would be returning to the matter after some research and deliberation. So lesson 2, don't give up. Learn from your setbacks and use them to your advantage. In this case, I discovered why the board rejected the initial proposal. I did have to ask. And I learned what I would need to do to construct a strategy going forward. So we began drafting a formal proposal to the art board. We, being me and 3 colleagues who reassured me, the initial 3 colleagues who initially reassured me I wasn't nuts for being outraged. The subject line in my email, by the way, was "My continued sanity?" But actually, I'm going to digress a little bit. Malcolm Harris in Kids These Days talks about how adapting to a messed up world can't but mess you up, and I often feel like that's the condition that I live under 24/7. So we did research. I read about contemporary labor issues. I read the Department of Labor's web pages on mandatory compensation, et cetera, et cetera. And then in December 2016, one of those supportive colleagues, my former supervisor and the person who hired me when I was in library school, who could have, if she was unethical, hired me as an unpaid intern, but she didn't, Susan Woodland, announced she had identified an art board member who was supportive of the initial proposal. Alex Lederman, who I think is here today. Thank you, Alex. Alex would be willing to bring our concerns to the board again in a proposal form. So we set up a phone call, and by the end of the month, I was using my Christmas break to put the final touches on the first draft of a document that ultimately incorporated suggestions and support from 5 archivists employed in different sectors of the archives profession, an archival educator, and a member of the Society of American Archivists senior leadership. So that's our national association. And we collectively decided to tie the formal proposal to SAA's best practices for internships. We thought this was a good idea. Specifically, we asked that internship supervisors be clearly identified in all postings, including their titles, that postings identify projects that could be completed in 1 semester, and that compensation or lack thereof be explicit. I don't think that's asking for a lot. There were other demands, but we felt these were key to helping to identify unpaid internships that really are replacing entry-level jobs. So lesson 3 is don't be reticent when it comes to solidarity. Personal relationships help, but also be willing to contact people you don't know yet. Familiarizing yourself with pre-existing efforts aligned with your goals is invaluable. Like, I didn't know that SAA had guidelines until one of those people helping me pointed that out. And don't reinvent wheels when what you really need to be doing is enforcing or modifying existing wheels. That's kind of a weird metaphor, sorry. In early February 2017, after we all signed off on the final draft of the proposal, but before we submitted it to the board, I received a message from the board president that they would be reconsidering my initial proposal. Nonetheless, we submitted our formal 5-page proposal, which Davis shared with you all through Google Drive, so you can all read it. And then we waited. And then at the annual art business meeting in June 2017, we were told that art would be more closely aligning its internship posting standards with SAA's guidelines, but our proposal was not accepted. And I wish I could say now, well, we all lived happily ever after. And instead, as all of you do, we simply live. We continue to monitor the art jobs listserv, and we send reminders when questionable internships slip through, but it's still unclear to us exactly how the posting guidelines have improved, if at all. So the final lesson, which is the not so inspiring one, is you cannot rest on your laurels, especially if you didn't earn them in the first place. Economic justice work never ends as long as inattention, distraction, and exhaustion benefit those seeking to exploit our vulnerabilities. And I want to be absolutely clear. Professional organizations are not the exploiters. However, they supply the channels through which exploitation occurs. So I want us to consider what those interns are actually learning, because internships are supposed to be educational. As Malcolm Harris writes in Kids These Days on the relationship between millennials and unpaid internships, quote, it being free labor, teaches people to be servile, anxious, and afraid. And those are not the type of people who get paid the kind of money that lasts. And now that you've heard this story without an ending, sorry, it's not a happy story. I want to open up the discussion. The proposal I just addressed, only addresses one type of unpaid internship. Is probably the easiest type to target, internships that clearly replace entry-level jobs. But, what do we do going forward? Where do we go from here? And just to kind of kick off our discussion, according to the MIT Living Wage Calculator, the minimum hourly living wage in New York City for a single adult without children, so that's like the lowest level, is $15.50 an hour. We have this wonderful, thank you so much, Metro, for putting this together. There's this whole chunk of this job visualization that is library workers making under a living wage in New York City. Sorry about that, people on YouTube. Poverty wages in New York City are $5 an hour, but that's $5 above what a laborer makes when she's an unpaid intern. So I want to kind of give the mic to everybody out there. Hopefully this was a coherent presentation. This has been like 10 years of my life, condensed into 15 minutes.
Hi. I guess one of the questions I have is how do you encourage the people that you're trying to mentor to say, I mean, even though it looks like the most plum internship in the world, that it's very exploitive, and how do you turn them, or at least try to convince them that there are other ways that you could be doing an internship where you wouldn't be exploited?
Well, I encourage all young people who contact me to, think about the debt that they've taken on going to library school. Think about if you do take an unpaid internship for, 6 months, that's 6 months you're not paying down your debt for, student loans. How are you going to pay for your apartment? How are you going to feed yourself? Are you just going to eat peanut butter every day for the rest of your life? Think about your dignity. It might be wonderful that you're doing an unpaid internship in placement site XYZ, but when I look at resumes, and I've looked at a lot of resumes lately, it's really disturbing to me to see some people spend 2 years of their professional lives not being paid, and as somebody who's in a position to hire people, what kind of advocate are you going to be for my institution if you can't even advocate for yourself? It sounds harsh, but that's my baseline, is if you can't even get somebody to pay you, I would rather see you working in a job that's maybe not as prestigious, but at least you're getting paid.
So I work at a couple of different museum libraries. One of the museum libraries I work at, for many years, their summer full-time internship program was an unpaid 4-credit internship program. Just last year, they finally started to fund it, offering each intern $5,000 for a stipend for the summer, which is great. But their academic year internship program is still unfunded. It's typically a 2-day-a-week commitment, and those students aren't getting compensated at all. And most of the graduate student interns I work with, many of whom are just 1 or 2 years behind in school from me, some of whom I actually went to graduate school with, are doing this unpaid internship for credit, many of them going to school full time and also working another part-time job to like make the income that they need. And I'm just wondering, you know, if these best practices could be expanded so that, you know, institutions aren't like sort of saying, oh yes, we offer a wonderful paid internship program here, but then the rest of the year they're still relying on unpaid labor to keep the institution running.
That's actually a great point, and so I don't start sounding like Fran Drescher up here. I work at the New School, and a student actually turned me on to this pay interns site where a lot of organizations within the creative professions have actually signed on to this declaration that we will pay our interns. And I'm wondering, that since you brought that up, maybe this is something that could happen in the information professions where different libraries and archives sign on to a declaration, we pay our interns. And, you know, by not signing on, you're kind of communicating to the rest of the world that you don't really value your employees. You know, maybe that's the way to go.
I've actually seen that site, and almost every company on there is a large for-profit corporation. It's like Facebook or like IDEO or Google or things like this. Sort of having worked in the nonprofit sector for almost all of the time I've been working, I feel like many nonprofit organizations actually get away with paying their interns nothing or less because they're using like sort of this like mask of social good to encourage people to work for less. And I think that like, yes, there should be something like this pay interns site, but like I think there should be more pressure on nonprofit organizations to pay their interns fairly, and that like students shouldn't feel like they should be pressured to work for like a top 10 corporation if they want to get paid.
I just also wonder how much of this goes back to like the internship requirement that many LIS programs have, and the fact that many of those require students to pay for credits, so they actually are paying to work. And I think, you know, earlier we heard a little bit about competition in publishing, right, that makes everyone sort of like every man for himself. And I remember when I was in library school, like I couldn't take an unpaid internship. And I felt like I was taking less prestigious internships and like doing stuff that wasn't actually like what I necessarily wanted to go into because I needed to get paid, and that might put me at a professional disadvantage. And I feel like the LIS program that I was in kind of reinforced that in the way that they structure their internship sort of for credit internship course. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on, you know, the sort of role that LIS institution might play.
Undoubtedly, LIS schools play a huge role in that they kind of set the stage. I also attended a university that required unpaid internships, only one semester though. And a lot of the resumes I'm seeing now, students are doing unpaid internships for sometimes 2 years. So obviously the schools are setting the stage, but that message is carrying on sometimes after the students have graduated, because you can do unpaid internships forever, I guess. I don't know. But I do think we should be targeting our schools, too. And, you know, I went to Queens College, and I think they claim, like, oh, well, the state of New York requires this. You know what? Lobby the state of New York to change it. You know, we can do this. It's not like, you know, the fact that we need oxygen to breathe, like we can't change that. But we can change educational requirements. Maybe it just involves talking to the right people in Albany. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're at time. I know this is a loaded topic. I hope you all continue the discussion. But once more, thanks